The night before my brother's company launch, our housekeeper knocked on my bedroom door and whispered 4 words that changed everything. "Don't go to sleep." I almost laughed. Margaret had worked for our family for 14 years. She raised me through 2 moves, 1 divorce, and the year I stopped eating because my college boyfriend left me for my roommate. She didn't say unnecessary things, ever. So when she stood in my doorway at 11:17 at night, still wearing her apron, holding her phone with both hands like it was evidence, I sat up. My name is Nora. I'm 31 years old. I'm a corporate attorney, which means I've spent the last 9 years learning exactly how people lie on paper. I'm good at my job. I thought I was good at reading people, too. I was wrong about the people who mattered most. Margaret stepped inside and closed the door softly behind her. She set her phone on my bed, screen up. A voice recording app. The little red bar was still moving. "I recorded it by accident," she said quietly. "I was calling my daughter." The phone was in my apron pocket. I heard them from the hallway. I looked at the timestamp. 43 minutes long. I pressed play. The first voice I heard was my husband's. Daniel. The man who held my hand at my father's funeral. The man who said, when I made partner 3 years ago, that I was the most capable person he had ever known. The man who, 8 months ago, asked me to co-sign the business loan for my brother's tech startup because the bank required a second guarantor with clean credit history. I had signed. Because that's what you do for family, that's what you do for love. His voice came through the speaker, low and unhurried, the way he talks when he's certain of something. "She won't check until after the launch. You know how she gets during big events. She goes into logistics mode, stops looking at anything personal." My brother's voice next. Kyle. 28 years old, the golden one. The one my mother still calls her baby even though he stands 6'2". The transfer clears Friday. By the time she looks at the account structure, it'll already be registered under the holding company. I stopped the recording. I sat very still for a moment. Then I pressed play again. Margaret sat on the edge of my bed and folded her hands and didn't say a word. That's what 14 years looks like. She knew I needed to hear it all before I could breathe again. The recording continued. They talked for 31 more minutes. I learned that Daniel had used my co-signature on the loan as a gateway document. With my name on the original loan, he had quietly drafted a secondary authorization, one I had never seen, that transferred operational authority over the startup's intellectual property to a holding company. A holding company registered in Delaware. A holding company where the 2 listed directors were Daniel and Kyle. Not me. They hadn't stolen money. They had stolen the architecture. The patents my brother's company was built on, 3 of them had been developed using a framework I had actually outlined during a working dinner 14 months ago. I had sketched the legal protection structure on a napkin. Kyle had photographed it. I thought it was casual. I thought it was love. It was sourcing. My brother's launch event was in 18 hours. The investor presentation was in 22. The patents would be formally registered under the holding company at 9 a.m. The following morning. The moment that happened, my name disappeared from everything I had helped build. And because the loan was structured the way it was, I remained on the hook for the liability while they absorbed the asset. It was elegant, honestly. I could recognize that even then. Sitting on my bed at 11:40 at night, still in the clothes I'd worn to the pre-launch dinner where Daniel had put his arm around me and called me his brilliant wife in front of everyone. I looked at Margaret. "How long have you known something was wrong?" I asked. She was quiet for a moment. "I didn't know. I suspected. For about 3 months. The way they stopped talking when you walked into rooms. The way Daniel started taking calls in the garage. Why didn't you say anything?" She looked at her hands. "Because I was afraid I was wrong, and I was afraid of what it would do to you if I was right." I reached over and squeezed her hand once. "Thank you," I said. "And I meant it the way you mean things at midnight when the world has just rearranged itself." Then I told her to go get some rest. And I opened my laptop. People assume that when you discover a betrayal, you fall apart. That you cry, or scream, or call someone. I've seen it in clients. That first wave that takes your legs out from under you. I had that wave. It lasted approximately 4 minutes. I sat in it. I felt the full weight of what Daniel had said. She goes into logistics mode, stops looking at anything personal, and I understood that he had studied me the way you study a lock before you pick it. Then the wave passed. And what was underneath it was not grief. It was clarity. I am a corporate attorney. I have unwound 3 fraudulent partnership agreements, 2 predatory licensing contracts, and 1 very creative inheritance restructuring in the last 4 years alone. I know what paper trails look like from the inside. I know which threads, when pulled, unravel everything else. And I had 18 hours. The first thing I did was pull every document I had signed in the last 2 years. I keep digital copies of everything, an old habit from my first year of practice when a senior partner told me that the only paper that matters is the one you can produce in 30 seconds. I found the co-signature authorization for the loan within 4 minutes. The language was standard on the surface. But buried in Section 9, subsection C, there was a clause referencing affiliated instruments. That's the thread they had used to attach the secondary authorization. The one I never saw. The one that was, I was now certain, either forged with a digital copy of my signature or signed by me under false description during the stack of documents Daniel had handed me during a refinancing conversation 6 months ago. I remembered that evening. A Tuesday. I had just come home from a 14-hour day. He had pasta on the stove. He said the bank needed updated financial confirmations, nothing major, here's a pen. I had signed 4 pages without reading them because the pasta smelled like the first dinner he ever cooked me, and I was so tired and so in love and so certain that the person handing me papers would never use them against me. I documented everything I found. Timestamped. Organized by category. Then I started on the patents. The 3 patents my brother's company was filing, I knew their contents because I had been in the room when the core legal frameworks were discussed. More than that, I had introduced Kyle to the IP attorney who structured them. That attorney's name was Renata. We had gone to law school together. She owed me a phone call. It was 12:40 in the morning. I called her anyway. She picked up on the second ring, because that's who Renata is. I didn't explain everything. I said, I need to know if there's a co-development argument available for the Callaway IP portfolio. And I need to know tonight. Silence. Then, Nora, what happened? I'll tell you everything after. Right now I need the answer. She asked me 4 questions. I answered them. At the end, she said, if what you're describing is accurate, you have a viable co-authorship claim on at least 2 of the 3. Possibly all 3, depending on documentation. What would filing that claim do to the registration timeline? It would freeze it, she said. Pending review. The registration couldn't proceed until the dispute was resolved. I thanked her. I told her I'd call in the morning. I hung up and sat with that information for exactly 60 seconds. Then I started drafting. Not a confrontation, not a cease and desist. Something quieter and more precise. A formal co-authorship disclosure submitted to the Patent Office with supporting documentation, time-stamped communications, and a sworn statement from me regarding the origin of the legal frameworks in question. I had emails. I had a calendar entry from 14 months ago that read Kyle IP Structure Dinner, Nora's outline. I had a photograph Kyle himself had sent me the next morning. The napkin, with a caption that said, "You're a genius, sis." He sent me the evidence himself. He just didn't think I'd ever need to use it. I filed the disclosure at 2:58 in the morning. Then I did one more thing. The investor presentation was scheduled for 10 a.m. The lead investor was a firm called Aldridge Capital. I had actually met the managing partner, a woman named Patricia, at a legal conference in Chicago 8 months ago. We had spoken for 20 minutes about patent protection strategy in early-stage tech. She had given me her card. I had given her mine. I sent her an email at 3:15 a.m. The subject line was, "Regarding tomorrow's Callaway presentation material, you should review first." I attached nothing inflammatory. No accusations. Just a professional note indicating that I had filed a co-authorship disclosure on the IP portfolio that morning, that the registration was now under review, and that I wanted to ensure her team had complete information before proceeding. That's it. No drama, No threats. Just facts, delivered quietly, to the right person, at the right time. Then I closed my laptop and went to sleep for 4 hours. The launch event was held at a rooftop venue downtown. String lights, catered appetizers, a slideshow of the company's journey. My mother was there in a blue dress, looking proud. Daniel was there in the gray suit I had picked out for him 6 months ago for exactly this kind of occasion. I wore red. I smiled. I hugged my mother. I accepted a glass of champagne from a server and stood near the railing and watched my brother give his speech about vision and persistence and the people who believed in him from the beginning. He looked at me when he said that last part. He actually looked directly at me. I raised my glass. Daniel appeared at my elbow around the 40-minute mark. He slipped his hand to the small of my back the way he always does in public, a gesture that used to feel like warmth and now felt like stage direction. "You look beautiful," he said. "Thank you," I said. "Everything okay?" "You seem quiet." I turned to look at him. Really look at him. The face I had woken up next to for 6 years. The face that had, 40 hours ago, said she goes into logistics mode, stops looking at anything personal. "I'm just taking it all in," I said. He smiled. Squeezed my waist. Moved to talk to someone else. At 9:17 a.m., my phone showed an alert from the patent office system. Filing status, under review. Registration, suspended pending dispute resolution. At 9:43, Kyle's phone rang. I saw him check the screen, frown, step away from a conversation. He came back, looking like someone had slightly changed the temperature of the room without telling him. At 10:02, the Aldridge Capital team arrived for the presentation. Patricia was not among them. She had sent 2 associates instead. They were polite. They were also very, very thorough with their preliminary questions in a way that suggested someone had briefed them to be. At 10:31, Daniel texted me. "Did you submit something to the patent office?" I didn't reply. At 10:44, Nora. "Call me." At 11:03, Kyle found me near the appetizer table. He looked younger than 28 suddenly. He looked like the kid who used to ask me to proofread his college essays. "What did you do?" he said quietly. "I protected my intellectual contribution," I said. "The way you taught me not to." His jaw tightened. "You're going to kill the launch." "The launch is fine. The IP registration is on hold. That's a legal process, not a catastrophe. Unless there's something about that registration you'd prefer not to have reviewed." He stared at me. "Kyle," I said, and my voice was very calm, because I had spent the night doing the work instead of the crying. "I know about the holding company. I know about the secondary authorization. I know about the document stack Daniel handed me on a Tuesday in February." The color changed in his face. "I'm not here to make a scene," I said. "I'm here because Mom is here and she looks happy and I'm not going to take that from her today. But by Friday, I need to receive a formal proposal for resolution. Or the next disclosure I file will not be to the patent office." I picked up an appetizer, ate it, and walked away to go stand with my mother. She took my arm and pointed at the city skyline and said, "Isn't this something? Your brother did something real." "He did," I said. And I meant it, actually. The company was real. The idea was good. That part wasn't a lie. It was everything built around it that was rotten. The drive home was silent. Daniel drove. I looked out the window. "Somewhere around the 3rd traffic light," he said. "We should talk." "We will," I said. "Nora." "Not tonight," I said. "I'm tired." He didn't push. He was calculating. I could almost hear it. The unraveling didn't happen all at once. That would have been too simple. It happened the way these things always happen, when you pull the right thread gradually, then all at once. By Tuesday, the Aldridge associates had reported back to Patricia. She called me directly at 2 in the afternoon, which told me everything I needed to know about which way she was leaning. "I want to understand the situation from your perspective," she said. I gave her 30 minutes. Organized, factual, documented. At the end, she thanked me and said she'd be in touch with the company's team about revised terms. Translation: the original deal structure was gone. By Wednesday, Daniel had retained a lawyer. I knew because the lawyer called my office looking for a professional courtesy conversation, which is what lawyers do when their clients are in trouble and they want to assess how much trouble before committing to a strategy. I declined the call politely and asked them to submit any communication in writing. By Thursday, Kyle came to my office. He sat across from me with the look of someone who has spent several days realizing that the person they underestimated had, in fact, been paying attention the entire time. "How did you know?" he asked. I thought about Margaret, standing in my doorway, phone in both hands, still wearing her apron. "Someone who actually cared about me told me," I said. Imagine that. He was quiet for a long time. Then, I didn't think it would feel like this. Like what? Like losing a person. I thought it was just business. Structure. I told myself you'd be fine, that you didn't need the credit. I didn't need the credit, I said. I needed the truth. There's a difference. He looked at the window. Daniel said you'd sign without reading. That you trusted him too much to check. I let that sit in the room for a moment. He was right, I said. And that's the part that's going to take me the longest to forgive myself for. Not the documents, not the patent. The fact that I had spent 9 years teaching clients never to sign without reading, and then I came home and did exactly that because I thought love was a different category. Kyle didn't have an answer for that. Nobody does. "What do you want?" he finally asked. "A proper co-authorship credit on the IP. Compensation for the legal framework contribution, fair valued, and the secondary authorization document declared void in writing with counsel present." And Daniel? I looked at my brother for a long time. The person who used to fall asleep on my shoulder during long car rides. The person I had bailed out of a badly situation at 23 without telling our parents. The person who photographed a napkin and said, "You're a genius, sis," and meant both the compliment and the theft simultaneously. Daniel is a separate conversation, I said. And not one you need to be part of. The settlement took 11 days. Not because it was complicated. Because Daniel kept believing, right up until the 9th day, that I would soften. That the wife in me would override the attorney. That love would make me careless again. It didn't. On day 9, I filed a formal petition to have the secondary authorization document reviewed for signature authenticity. That's the kind of filing that, if the signature turns out to be reproduced without direct consent, becomes something much more serious than a civil matter. On day 10, Daniel's lawyer called my lawyer and said their client was prepared to reach a resolution. On day 11, I sat in a conference room with glass walls and a plate of untouched pastries and watched 3 people sign documents that said, in clean legal language, that I had been there all along. That my contribution was real. That my name belonged on what I had helped build. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt accurate. Like a sentence that had been missing a word and finally had it back. My mother called that evening. Someone had told her I don't know who and I didn't ask. She cried for a while. She said she didn't understand. She said she was sorry. She said she didn't know. I believed her about not knowing. I believed her about being sorry. The not understanding that one might take longer. "What happens now?" she asked. "I'm going to take a week off," I said. "First time in 4 years. And Daniel?" "We're separating," I said. "The paperwork is already drafted." She cried again. I held the phone and let her, because she had earned the right to cry about it and I had already done mine 4 minutes on a bed at midnight, and then I had put it somewhere useful. Before I hung up, she said, "Nora, you're so strong. You've always been so strong." I thought about what I wanted to say to that. I thought about how being called strong is sometimes the loneliest thing because it means everyone assumed you didn't need anything, that you were fine, that you could carry it, and so nobody thought to check. "I had help," I said. Margaret told me. If she hadn't knocked on my door that night, I wouldn't have known until it was too late. My mother went quiet. "Then, I'll have to thank her." "Yes," I said. "You will. And so will I. Properly." The next morning I went to the house that was in both our names and would take another few months to fully untangle, and I found Margaret in the kitchen making coffee. I set an envelope on the counter next to her. Inside was a letter and a check that represented the thing I could do, even if it wasn't enough for what she had done. She looked at the envelope, then at me. "You don't have to," she said. "I know," I said. "That's why I wanted to." She pressed her hand over mine for a moment and didn't say anything else. We stood in that kitchen, the one I had eaten breakfast in for 6 years, and I looked at the morning light coming through the window and thought about all the things we mistake for permanence. Then I picked up my bag and I left. I took that week off like I promised myself. I stayed at a small rental near the water, 3 hours from the city. I ran in the mornings. I read books that had nothing to do with law. I called Renata and took her to dinner and told her everything, and she listened and refilled my wine glass and said, at the end, "You know what the most impressive part was?" "What?" "You didn't leak it. You didn't post about it. You didn't call anyone to perform the breakdown. You just handled it." "I had 4 minutes of breakdown," I said. Then I opened my laptop. She laughed. That might be the most Nora sentence I've ever heard. I thought about that on the drive back to the city on Sunday. About who I was before that midnight knock on my door and who I was after. About the things you only find out about yourself when someone takes everything and you have to decide what to do with the 8 hours before morning. I had thought that trusting people was my weakness. I've spent a long time since then reconsidering that. Trusting the wrong people was the problem. Trusting without verification was the problem. But the capacity itself, the part of me that co-signed a loan for her brother, that signed documents over pasta because the apartment smelled like love, that part wasn't the flaw. They tried to use it as one. That's different. I'm back at work now. I took on 2 new clients last month. I restructured my practice to include an IP co-authorship specialty, which, given recent events, I understand more thoroughly than most. Daniel and I don't speak. The separation is clean, or as clean as 6 years can be made. Kyle called me last week. Not about the company, just a call. I let it ring twice, then picked up. We talked for 11 minutes about nothing important: our mother's new garden project, a restaurant that opened near his apartment, whether the weather was going to turn early this year. It wasn't forgiveness. It was something smaller and more honest than that. A door left open a crack. Maybe we walk through it eventually. Maybe we don't. Margaret is still working for our family. For my mother now, officially. She sends me a text every Sunday morning. Just a weather update or a picture of something blooming in the yard. I always write back. I don't know what I believe about the shape of things. About whether people are fundamentally selfish or fundamentally good, or some architecture of both that shifts depending on what they think they can get away with. What I know is this. The night before everything changed, a woman in an apron knocked on my door and chose me. She had nothing to gain. She had her job to lose, technically. She knocked anyway, because 14 years of watching someone grow up means something, and she wasn't willing to pretend otherwise. That's the thing I carry with me now. Not the betrayal, not the settlement, not the 4 minutes of falling apart on a Tuesday night. The knock. The apron. The phone held with both hands like it was something fragile and important. It was. I used to think strength meant doing it alone. Now I think it means knowing who actually shows up. And making sure, when they do, that you notice. I don't sign anything without reading it anymore. I don't mistake proximity for loyalty. I don't let love make me careless with the things I built. But I still trust people. Just differently. Carefully. With the part of me that is also an attorney. And if someone knocks on my door at 11:17 at night holding a phone like it's evidence, I sit up,